Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Horror Squad podcast, where today we are joined by a very special guest. Horror fans will know her best from her roles in Family Blood, We Need to Do Something, and of course, The Hills Have Eyes remake. But most of you will know her best for her role as Allison in Hocus Pocus. Please welcome back to the show for the second time, Vinessa Shaw. Vanessa, thanks so much for joining us tonight. How you doing?
Yay, I'm doing great. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Steve, for having me on again.
Of course, it's our pleasure. Now, of course, the big reason you're here today is to promote. It's just a bunch of Halloween weekend, which will be taking place in Salem, Massachusetts, October 11th through the 13th. We are once again very excited to be a part of that weekend. Can you tell our listeners and the fans what they can expect out of this weekend?
It's going to be packed with fun. We're outdoing ourselves from last year. We are doing a party. We are doing a signing and meet and greet signing. We are doing a burlesque, Hocus Pocus themed burlesque show. We are doing a trolley tour. And we're also doing some commentary over Hocus Pocus. So this will be one of our first times doing that in a bigger fashion, I would say. And so that'll be fun to hear because we're also including the bullies who play Jay and Ice,
Mhm.
Tobias and Larry in our commentary. So I'm sure it's going to be pretty unruly and out of control, but that's okay. That's what we want. So anyway, it's going to be really fun because honestly, where do you get to go to events that are the theme of a movie you love so much with the actual actors that are in the movie? I think it's kind of rare. So we're always down to be with the fans, and we love you all so much. So we decided to up the ante this year and do even more. And so we're super excited for all the events that are taking place this year.
Yeah, and I was gonna mention that because this event is pretty special because most obviously you do a fair amount of conventions and stuff with your Hocus Pocus castmates and stuff. But this is different. Most conventions, you show up and you're there and you meet the fans and that's it. But you guys decided with this event that you really wanted to get your hands dirty and sort of, really make this your own.
It's true. I feel like it really is nostalgic for us, as well as those of you who are fans of Hocus Pocus, because we were teenagers making this movie, like literal teenagers. Thora was the youngest. She was, I think, 10 years old, but all of us were like burgeoning actors and young in our careers and young literally at age. So it was such a pivotal film for me personally. It was my second movie, and so and I dreamed about being in these kinds of movies because I watched Disney's movies incessantly when I was a child. And so this was like a dream come true. So reliving all of that with all the fans over and over again at these conventions made us realize we want to do something on a bigger scale and do it ourselves. And, we wanted to curate how it came off to people. And we wanted to do the parties that we felt were fun if we were to participate in it. Because again, I honestly, just to be honest, like if I weren't in this movie at all, to be honest, I would have been a huge fan of it because it's totally my jam. Especially at the time it came out,
Yeah.
right age for it, all of that. So, yeah, I feel like we want to live the nostalgia with all the fans because we're just as nostalgic as you also. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know for the fans that are coming are in for a treat because I had heard Larry has some behind the scenes footage that he had filmed that you guys are going to be premiering at the screening, so that will be very
I
exciting to see.
know. I cannot believe you did that. And what's crazy is my mom probably has more footage because she had those big, huge, heavy cameras that were over the shoulder, like 7 bricks and would video everything. And so who knows where that is? I mean, he's so much better at archiving, clearly. But maybe one day I hope to add her side of everything. But I can't wait to see. He's told me a little bit about it, but I haven't seen any, so I'm excited. Yeah.
Now, the popularity of Hocus Pocus, it just gets bigger. Like it seems like every single year, like every year I go into a store and I see more and more Hocus Pocus stuff on the shelves. And obviously we got the sequel last year. It sounds like there's gonna be a third one coming. Like so my question for you is like when you're like out like in a shopping mall or whatever around this time and you start to see all of this sort of merchandising pop up, 30 years later, do you ever like sort of pause and reflect and just say, wow, I really was a part of something extremely special?
I seriously do. I feel honored. I feel, interestingly enough, there are so many movies that I was a huge fan of, in the theater, like, um, interestingly enough, like Titanic, for instance, is a huge
Mm.
blockbuster. But the fandom for Hocus Pocus is far reaching than that movie. I feel like it's like, because it's a I really feel like it's because it's a seasonal movie around a holiday that's geared towards children, that generations are, finding out about it more and more year after year. So I go into those stores, or I see, honestly, like my son was watching a YouTube thing the other day with the teenage kid. I don't remember what it was, but he likes doing pranks on people, and he
Mhm.
was talking about how he's going to do this prank to like scare his friend that there's a ghost, and then he was like, "But you can form a circle of salt to protect yourself." So it's like, it's so weird that it's that Hocus Pocus, you know, dialogue as part of like the vernacular of just an everyday kid YouTube channel, that nobody may ever understand. It's like seeped in there, and so um, I just feel like just how I felt about like Julie Andrews and Mary Poppins, um, or Haley Mills, like with Parent Trap when I was growing up. I feel like if I saw them right now, like out and about, I would die and like literally pass out because of how much impact they had on me as a child. Because I watched it over again on my own free will. But people are almost geared towards watching it. It's like it's Halloween time, even if you don't like
Mm.
Hocus
Right.
Pocus, here it is.
Mm.
And thank God it's a good movie, or otherwise people would be so annoyed. But so it's that repetitive kind of nostalgic, jolt that you get every time you see the movie. So when it's just a part of the vernacular, part of like everyday shopping
Mm.
for Halloween, paraphernalia, it's just mind blowing to me because of how much I know how much nostalgia lives inside of me for those kinds of, actors I just mentioned,
Mhm.
but like how that is like literally put in your face every single Halloween, and even earlier, it's already out. All the
Yeah.
paraphernalia is out already, and it's
Mhm.
only the end of August. So
Right.
yeah.
One thing that's synonymous with both Halloween and Hocus Pocus, of course, is Salem, Massachusetts, which
Mm.
is where the event is going to take place in October. How was it going to Salem? Maybe the first time when you went through the filming of Hocus Pocus versus when you're coming for events like this and getting to re-experience Salem for all its Halloween madness.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's just been amazing to do these events, with you and all the people in Salem have been helping support us to make it happen. And I'm glad we've proven ourselves not to be just usurping everyone's time
Mm.
and money to make this happen. But it's interesting for me to see, in everyday people who own the shops, the storefronts have Hocus Pocus paraphernalia too. Whereas before, obviously when we were filming it, there was, nothing to be found in terms of our movie because it hadn't been out yet. But um, I just remember Salem being a very, very sleepy town. Um, Again, I was a teenager. I don't know, like I had traveled a lot because I was also modeling a little bit. And so you know, maybe I expected more. I don't know. But what I was struck by was just the beauty and the calm that I felt, and something that a teenage girl like me from California has really never seen, which is
Mhm.
the leaves, the foliage.
Hmm.
Like, I wanted to be in that every single day. I
Mhm.
was like, I want to go for a walk. I want to run in the leaves, you know, jump in them, get buried in them. Like, I just was like, this is just so brand new for me. It's just like someone coming to the beach here, I guess. So, you know, the sleepy town thing was kind of eclipsed by my awe of the beauty of the New England foliage, you know, during autumn. So, um, but yeah, I think I remember just there being the Salem Witch Museum, and that was it. Um, and obviously, the Common, and that was where I learned more about, like, you know, obviously American history, from there versus Hocus Pocus history,
Mhm.
which is now what it's part, what I think people are looking for on the tour,
Right.
nowadays. But I think because I was 16, I was also learning about the American Revolution, and all of the things that were taking place were right there. So that was a flashbulb memory for me. I'm like, wow, here I am, you know. So there was, it just seemed more of a historical feeling to me. And again, Omri remembers this, that we went to go to Walden Pond,
Mm.
um, as well. Um, and of course, I was reading that in school, on Walden Pond, and so that was really interesting. That, like, my studies as a student were reflecting in my work. You know,
Mm.
I mean, they say like work is in daily life can be synonymous, but I was like, this is a little too creepy. I like how the timing of it all, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I will say Salem definitely used to be that sleepy town, but I
Mhm.
think, and I do think Hocus Pocus has become a big part of why people are coming in more and more. As you saw, obviously, last year when you were here, the amount of people that dress up like the Sanderson sisters showing everything. It's just, it's unbelievable. And you guys are definitely a big credit to that. I gotta ask, is there? It doesn't have to be, I guess, Salem location related, but is there a particular scene that you filmed that sort of sticks out as being either just a favorite that you filmed, or perhaps the most challenging one that sort of sticks out as your one of your a big memory for you?
Well, the one that was my favorite, of course, for the reason I just mentioned, you'll understand why when I say
Hmm.
what it is, and also the most challenging was the scene with Max and Allison when she's dissing him and giving his phone
Hmm.
number back.
Hmm.
Um, I just, you know, I think up till then I had only done one other movie called Ladybugs, and there were definitely scenes with big extras, and you know, like, a lot of people moving, and you know, activity before a scene, because it was just all about like the stands and the players and all that. But because it's a soccer movie, for those of you who don't know.
No,
um
I remember it fondly. Actually, I watched it a lot growing up. It was like on, I feel like, TV all the time in my youth.
yeah, it really is. And so for me, that I felt it was different because I could feel this energy, and like, go, and you, the extras over here, like moving, and just like to get that cinematic moment of panning across, and I'm walking, and the leaves are falling just so, and you know, the people are moving. I don't know what I thought it was going to be like, but when I arrived, it was like everyone was ready to go, and I was like, we had done maybe one rehearsal, and then we were on, and I just was like, I don't want to mess this up. This is like the most beautiful like, you know, basically panoramic scene of this, you know, beautiful foliage with me, and you know, it's like kind of, you know, pumped up to be like, oh, the romantic moment, and and it's a complete diss, which is funny. But you know, I was so nervous. I felt like my like lips were twitching. I just felt like I'm gonna mess this up. And I felt very shy in that scene when she's supposed to be badass, but it still came off badass. But it was like, I just remember being like, I am gonna mess this up, this beautiful scene with you know, me being confident in making a button, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that was just more of an internal struggle for me as a young actor, only having been my second movie. But otherwise, you know, I feel like that whole movie was a breeze, you know.
Mm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. I got one more Hocus Pocus question, then we'll jump over to some of your horror credits. Obviously, you know, the fans and all of us were disappointed when, you know, none of the legacy characters came back for, of course, the sequel in Hocus Pocus 2. But I want to ask you, where do you think, and I'm sure you've thought about this, you know, where is Allison today? You know, do you think she's still with Max? Where do you think your character is today?
Well, it's very interesting because if my family ran the museum, wouldn't Allison be in the museum? So I was very perplexed by this.
Yeah, it's true.
I was like, she's running the museum, she's in charge of,
Yeah.
you know, the historical society, like she just, you know, and it's probably like a front for her to protect everyone from the Sandersons coming back so she could just like, you know, be like hyper vigilant about it. So, um she's definitely working there in my mind is what I thought.
Okay.
And you know, she's definitely married to Max. They're so, you know, funny, and I'm sure he mellowed out and is, you know, just as mellow as he was his California laid back attitude. And that probably drives her crazy because she's, you know, totally different, East Coast girl. Um, and I feel like they have kids, and I feel like, you know, that's just what she would want. And you know, they say that when people get married, usually the guy moves, if it's a heterosexual relationship, the guy moves to the, you know, the woman's side of the family and wherever. So that makes sense, even just historically with couples who get together. So anyway, I just think it's she's there, he's there. I feel like Danny's there. I feel like she's doing her own thing, Miss Independent, you know. And you know, the bullies are there too. I feel like no one
They're all there.
they leave their
It's a
they
small town,
probably
right?
those guys, yeah, who never
Mhm.
left their hometown. You know, maybe Allison and Max talked about moving to California, but her family is so rooted in Salem. It just seems like she would,
Mhm.
again, with that personal, like, you know, determination to be like the hero and not have that ever happen again, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I mean, I maybe we'll find out in the third movie, you know. I think I mean, I hope Disney heard, you know, from the fans that were so disappointed in the you know, with part 2 not seeing any of you guys come back, and like, let's, you know, listeners, everyone listening, let's try to push to get
I
everyone
know.
back for the third movie. It would be such a treat to see you all back.
Honestly, because we loved the movie so much and we loved the
Mhm.
experience, we were talking about this the other day because we do see each other on these convention routes all the time.
Mhm.
You know, honestly, I would have been like a janitor. Like I don't care. Like it could have been funny if like maybe I was a janitor in the museum, like, you know, like I just didn't quite make it, or, you know, who cares? And then just, you know, not even having any dialogue and looking up and being like, hello, can I help you? You know? Um, and that'd be even more hilarious. Who knows? But it's, you know, I really again appreciate everyone speaking up for us in that way.
Mhm.
Because we were the heroes. We were the
Of
heroes.
course, yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Mhm. I always say the kids, I've always said this, I think the kids were the stars of the movie. Like, I know most people levitate towards the Sanderson sisters as being, but I always thought the kids were the ones I think you really connect with in that movie. And I mean, they're the heroes. They saved the day. So I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
I think that, you know, um, newer generations are speaking up.
Yeah.
Maybe people of a different generation were like, oh no, they're the heroes because they could relate to them because they were the
Mhm.
same age, you know. So now
Mhm.
it's a different generation, many generations later. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, you mentioned the janitor being playing a janitor, and I gotta say that's actually a perfect segue to get into our horror stuff now because we are going to be covering The Hills Have Eyes remake this week, which I'm going around the circle here, but Wes Craven played a janitor in Scream, actually, so that's why I mentioned
Oh,
that.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
But so yeah, the Hills Have Eyes remake. I want to ask a couple questions about that because I actually think it is one of the prime examples of a remake that surpasses the original in just about every way. I mean, obviously Wes Craven is an iconic director, and Hills Have Eyes was one of his original classics. But man, that remake, I will never forget seeing that movie in the theater, and it like rocks me to my core with how sort of gritty and dark and disturbing it was. The subject matter obviously was very disturbing. When reading through that script, a couple questions here, I guess. Were you hesitant at all about taking a role like that? And also, had you seen the original?
So the director, Alexandre Aja, is kind of, he's an auteur director. I know he's a director in horror films, and some people would poo-poo that, but he had his own like vision and influence that caused him to make um, the amazing decision of offering every single person in this movie their role. So nobody had to audition.
Wow.
They were all handpicked by him, and he was fans of every single person. He had seen them in a horror movie or some sort of thing that made him think these are the perfect people for these roles. And so I felt, because of that, I felt immediate trust with him. And you know, I had seen his original movie, his first movie, High Tension,
Mm.
and I was like, man, this is like all out, full on, no holds barred. I was like, but it was good. For me, I'm a wimp. I don't like horror movies. I get scared. I am just a wimp, and yet I'm in them, which is me, but maybe it's a good thing, and I bring vulnerability. But anyway, he uh his movie, I was like, this is um his professionalism and his artistic vision was so great that it kind of eclipsed and made me forget it was a horror movie. So, for my wimpy reasons. So I felt like I really got his vision and his storytelling. And when he approached me with it, I said, yes, but I do have a question about the scene where, you know,
Yeah.
that that scene. If nobody
If people have seen it, they know.
if they've seen it.
Mhm.
And he's like, no, 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 this is not going to be gratuitous. There's no
Mhm.
point in that. It's just going to be, more graphic, and obviously what's going on in your mind too, in terms of that, and more about the emotion of what's happening. So that was my only question. Also, nobody knows this, but we got to film in Morocco, which,
Oh.
he's French. So he's like, oh, we don't have to go all the way to New Mexico for me. He's like, we can just go to Morocco. I've seen these hills everywhere in Morocco in the Sahara Desert. And then upon going there, I was like, oh, yeah, this does look like New Mexico, oddly, these mountains. So I got to go to Africa. Like, I was like, okay, I'm not going to say no to Africa either. And I mean, that was an experience in and of itself. Just, Kathleen Quinlan and I got to go see the Berbers, the indigenous people there, went on our own little trip, not speaking, you know, um, like speaking the language at all. Like, there so many people were trying to speak to us and we didn't even know. And we had a driver who spoke a little French, and I was like, I speak a little Spanish. He started speaking French and I'd speak back in Spanish, and we kind of got it, through everything. But this was like the most, I was like, I'm doing a horror movie and I'm like experiencing life and culture here. So
Mm.
again, we're so fortunate as actors. We get to do these interesting things, and go to interesting places that you normally would never go. So, um, yeah, I couldn't deny going to Africa. That one scene, he explained it to me. I was ready to go. And I had seen the original, and I was like, "Oh, if this is gonna be like the original, this movie isn't that scary." So I was like, "I'm good." But having seen his debut film, I'm like, "Oh, this is gonna be raw." Um, and it was, and um, it was great, and he succeeded, and he made it better than the original. And that's a
Hmm.
very good thing to do, because he just did not hold back, and I think,
Yeah.
and he does what's good about him is he doesn't hold back on character, and he doesn't hold back in terms of the violence. So you are connected to the character, and that's what makes it so hard to watch, because if you just didn't care about it, it's some slasher, you're like, whatever, But I think that duality is so important. And that's what I felt like was existed in High Tension and in this movie as a remake.
Yeah, something I'm curious about is you have a wide range of roles in different genres, comedy, drama, horror. Is there something different about a horror set versus some of the other genres? Because a movie like Hills Have Eyes, you have this group who stay in the desert the whole time, they're together the whole time, they go through something really, extreme in a lot of ways. Does that make you closer as a cast, or does it maybe you get into your heads a little bit more? Like, what's the difference between a horror set versus other genres?
That's a really good question.
Mhm.
I wonder if you get closer as a cast because of the horror aspect. Um, Interestingly, I feel like what happens is when you go on location, that becomes easier. And particularly for Hills Have Eyes, because we're in a foreign country, in different continent, it was wild. It was like so different. I'd never experienced the extreme difference of culture in my life. I really had culture shock at first, and also the time difference, and um, maybe some of the shots I had to take before going there. I don't know, but I was like, I feel like I'm in another planet. So we were all staying in the same hotel, this hotel called the Berber Palace, which had its heyday, and there's cockroaches everywhere, and it's disgusting. This is my dog Rufus everywhere.
Aw, cutie.
And you know, that was the extent of our luxury experience there. It was just like getting sick, from the water, because obviously it's not the same water we have, and um, just really tough circumstances in terms of filming. I mean, we're fine as like humans, but it's just like, I have to go to the bathroom right now, and you're in the middle of a scene. It's just like, it's crazy. Anyway, there was um the closeness I feel really came from um again being on location. And again being in a totally foreign country, foreign in the extreme way of like, real culture shock. But beautiful too. I just remember you know, the call to prayer every morning at 5 a.m. It's just like over a loudspeaker, and Muslim prayers were, you know, done every morning. And I was just like, this is, I just, I just embraced it all. It was amazing.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel what's for just personally, I don't know if you were asking this too, but personally, like everything is so visceral in a horror movie that you just have to like know kind of what you're doing, and then it's just go. And then you have to literally like get into your body a lot more than any other, really any other genre. And so, you might be just like running around before they say action. So you can be, with your breath, and um, thinking about like extreme circumstances. So I always feel like I have to like decompress so much after doing a horror movie, take lots of baths and go to spas. Like my poor body has been through more than my brain. So
Mhm. Now, did Craven ever visit the set?
no, he didn't, but
No.
he had a bunch of his handed people that were there. Um,
Hmm.
and they were all so lovely. And the Fox people were there too, but yeah, he never came, but he was very happy with what apparently transpired. Um, or at least he never came when I was on set, but that's kind of rare because I feel like I was pretty much on set the whole time, except for after,
Right.
Mize. But spoiler alert, sorry for anyone. Bleep. Anyway. uh and there was a good 2 weeks I think they filmed afterwards without me, so could have
Mhm.
come then. I don't know, but I'm not sure.
All right. And then my final question, as far as Hills Have Eyes goes, is did Alexander Aja give you any sort of like homework prior to filming? Did he want like were there any certain movies he showed like wanted you to watch before filming this one?
Oh, I'm sure he did.
Mm.
That would be his kind of thing to do.
Mm.
um I don't remember watching any movies in
Mhm.
preparation, but I think he was saying you probably did share movies in the style of,
Mhm.
because he was such a cinephile. I mean, he was freaking out that I worked with Kubrick, so
Yeah.
every day.
Which which is a great segue to this will be my honestly, Vanessa, we could talk to you for hours because you have such a lengthy filmography and but we won't keep you much longer here. But
Well,
obviously, we could pick your brain all night. But the last question of the night is also a loaded question, and it's quite
okay.
and it's quite simply, can you share your experience, insight, and any stories you can give us about working with Stanley Kubrick?
So working with Stanley was a life-changing moment. Um, Prior to getting this job, I did Ladybugs, Hocus Pocus, did other films that were age appropriate. And this was the first movie I got that was more mature. Like, I was 20 getting this part. And I had seen Kubrick's movies and loved them. Literally, I'm not kidding. I think it was 2 months before I saw Doctor Strangelove projected onto a wall in Seattle with my friend who I, was hanging out with during the summer between my freshman and was it my freshman and sophomore year in college? Yes. And she was like, we were like, what a great movie. And like, just mind blowing that 2 months later, I'd get a call from him saying, them saying I got the part um, in this movie. Cause again, being so young, my parents were pretty progressive and were really wanting me to see the great directors. So I watched, The Godfather, Godfather Part 2 and 3. Like we did a binge weekend and watched all of, 1 and 2, and then went out and see 3 as a family. It's like, that's pretty dope. So, and that was like 91 or 2 or something. I don't even know the third
Yeah.
one. Yeah, so it's like 16, 15. So the fact that I was able to be in such a like the historical film was mind-blowing to me. I knew from the beginning it was going to be because of how many people love him. And so it wasn't like, will this movie make it? It's like, no, it was just who cares? It's Stanley, you do this movie. And upon going to work with him, was thinking in my very young brain, I was still thinking, I'm a child actor. I need to be perfect. I need to have my lines right. No one's going to deal with any BS from me. I have to be perfect because no one wants to work with children or animals, that kind of thing. So I walked into a world that was like totally presented in a different way of a structure of filmmaking that I'd never seen before. It was very slow. I met with Stanley for 2 hours one day in my first meeting in his office. And then he looked at his watch. He's like, "Oh, it's 3 o'clock. Okay, we'll meet tomorrow." And I'm like, "Wait, what was this? Was it just like a meeting?" I was like, "What are my lines going to be?" And I don't even know the script because it was very, top secret. And I'm like, supposedly you're supposed to be shooting this in 1 week. Like, I'm so not sure what's happening. And so then the next day, same thing, 2 hours talking. "Okay, we'll meet again tomorrow." And I'm like, "Okay, just all right, let's just slow down. Everything's gonna slow." The third time was Tom Cruise, who came in with, like, I think Stanley had within the first few minutes asked him to come in, and then he left the room. So it was just me and Tom sitting there. And I was like, "What's going on? How are we going to be doing anything? Like, I know my scenes are with you, but what are they?" And he's like, "Oh, relax, Vanessa. It's fine. You're good." Just gave that 1,000-watt smile. And then Stanley came in and he's like, "I'll see you soon." And I was just like, okay, if Tom Cruise, who is still the hardest working actor back then, is so chill, I was like, okay, I just got to get into the zone with Stanley. So I'm not kidding, like literally a week later, um, we're rehearsing the scene, and he's taken some of what I said in our conversations and written them in the scene about my being a student, studying sociology. Those didn't make it in the movie, but he had me write it in there. And then he was on set. He pointed out some bookshelves and was like, "Hey, look, this is books on sociology, and um, there's a book on dominoes, and that's your name." And so then I read the script, and I mean, I may be saying things out of order, but the script was very much a skeleton of what it ended up being. And I had to give it back. I couldn't, it was like one script that everybody passed around.
Wow.
And they were like knocking on my door. I was reading in my dressing room. They're like, "Are you done yet?" And I'm like, "Okay, all right." So I'm like, "Okay, again, just take in whatever this world of Stanley is." And so I'm like, "I'll be done in a minute." And yeah, that process really shook me out of being a perfectionist, because once we got the scene on its feet, because it's like really only one scene in two parts. I mean, nobody remembers that, but that's what it is. Um, is that I remember just being like, this seems like this part is taking a really long time. And then I asked his line producer, who is his brother-in-law, and I was like, "How many takes have we done?" He's like, "Oh, it's 69 takes, and you've beat out Full Metal Jacket for the most amount of takes." And I was like, "Oh my God." And I just realized something changed in me, of this repetition that just got me out of perfectionism. I was in a zone. I was literally like an athlete in a zone. And because I never did sports, I was acting the whole time. I didn't even know what that was. But I'm like, this is definitely what people experience when they're talking about being in the zone. And everything fell away. Like, props I had to move were just happening automatically. And so I really took away my own process from working with him because of his perfectionism. And I noticed how severely perfectionist he was, because at one point it wasn't, I don't think, that one shot that took 69 takes, but I was, oh no, it was after the 69 take. I was like, I'm going to pay attention to see what the heck is going on for 69 takes. And so he basically looked at the camera first. No, he looked at the lighting first, then the camera, would give notes on the camera, and then finally it was the actors. Because interesting enough, as I was paying attention, he ended up saying to me, "Did you do that before?" I'm like, "Yes, I've done that every single take." And he's like, "Oh, we'll do it again." I'm like, "Okay, this is my proving my point that he's seeing the big picture and the lighting and then the camera and then comes down to the fine tuning." And I mean, I was just like, wow, it's so let the process unfold type feeling,
Mhm.
which you can never get on any movie. And so it's just like, I'm never going to have this experience again on any movie. So I've got to bring this to my work. And um, it was really exciting for me because by that point, I was thinking I may not act anymore because of how limiting I felt as a child actor, even though I had fun, of course.
Mhm.
But I was like, people say they have these like life-changing experiences acting, and I'm like, that is not what I'm experiencing. And here was the experience. And I was like, wow, okay, that's what acting is. And Stanley pulled me aside at one point and was like, you're really good. And I was like, no, you're really good, Stanley. Like, I can't, it's all you. And he's like, quiet, I'm trying to talk to you. And I was like, okay. And he was telling me, at that point I was still, because I was transitioning from a child actor to a mature actor.
Mhm.
I was still had like my mom as a manager, and he's like, I think you're grown up now. You should really think about that. He said Marilyn Monroe could have been a great actor if she wasn't so attached to her coaches and her acting teachers.
Mhm.
And it's funny because I think she's a fantastic actor, and so many people kind of put her in a hole or pegged her in a certain way when she really had more depth.
Mhm.
So it's like I understand what he meant. And then so it was literally a job where I like spread my wings. And he said, I know that you're thinking of leaving acting and maybe just finding something else because you're going to school to figure it all out. And he's like, I think you should really stick with this. And so I ended up going back to school for one semester, and that was it for my junior year. And thought I was only going to be one semester, but I only lasted 2 weeks. And I was like, no, I really got to do this. And then he passed away. So it was really like, oh yeah. And then he also said, if you ever need any recommendations, have people call me. And I was like, am I dreaming? Like this is so crazy. Um, but I wasn't dreaming because at his memorial and at like, it was the memorial at the Directors Guild of America. His his daughters were like, my dad really loved you. And I was like, I loved him too. I felt like he had a huge impact on my life. And they're like, just gave me a hug. But he really did. I was looking at quitting, and that whole process was opened me up to like, oh, you can really get deep into a character and get deep into a scene. And, I even wrote a backstory on my character. So there was a lot of me, um, of who I am now because of that one experience that took forever because it was 6 months of shooting for
Mhm.
one scene.
Wow.
And anyway, so he really changed my life. And I was very sad when he passed because I felt like I had someone who I could connect to who is real and not Hollywood, for the rest of my life. But I ended up speaking to him in my heart and having feeling like he's rooting me on somewhere out there.
Mhm. Vanessa, we've interviewed hundreds of people on this podcast, and that whole answer was probably my favorite answer or
Oh,
story we've ever had on this. And I'm not just trying to pump you up. I sincerely mean that. That was amazing. Thank you
thanks.
so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was special. Um, I mean, I think that's a perfect way, honestly, to end this interview. One last thing. What about an underrated gem? Is there an underrated movie out there that you feel like a lot of people haven't seen that they should check out in your work?
Um, let's see. This is a good question. Um, yes. Um, I mean, in terms of comedy, I feel like Corky Romano is like underrated because it's really funny and slapsticky. And recently I had the opportunity to see Chris Kattan in the same city when I was doing a convention. He was doing stand-up. And I was like, was it the fact that like Zoolander like eclipsed us? Like I didn't remember why when it was released that it didn't do as well. And he's like, no, it was the week after 9/11 or the weekend
Oh.
9/11. And um they told everyone not to go into public spaces.
Mm.
So he's like, they said don't go to the movies. And so like we kind of bombed, but that one is underrated. And I feel like that one's having a comeback because people are seeing that it is pretty funny. And I mean, I laughed my entire experience on that one too. Yeah. And I guess for maybe like a more dramatic one, I would say Side Effects, a Steven Soderbergh movie that I did. It's kind of cool, thriller, and I feel like it's kind of came out ahead of its time because of the subject matter. It's like, people on antidepressants and the effect of that, and how one woman just totally uses it for her advantage and, you know, as a ploy. And so I feel like if that came out now, people would just love it. But those are the two I think that most people would enjoy if they haven't seen it yet.
All right.
Genre.
Excellent. Well, everyone, make sure go check out those Vanessa's underrated gems. Vanessa, once again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And if you'd like to hang out with Vanessa and the rest of the cast of Hocus Pocus, do not forget to join us for It's Just a Bunch of Halloween weekend in Salem, Massachusetts, October 11th through the 13th. You can get tickets at itsjustabunchahalloween.com. We have this linked, of course, all over our socials and everything. So you can find it on there. Vanessa, before we let you go, is there where can the people find you? Where, if you want to promote your socials, or you got any projects coming out soon that we can look forward to?
I have one project that's called Nichols. That's kind of a thriller as well. It's about this young man who basically goes into a coma, and when he comes to, he starts identifying with his neighbor's dead brother. And so that one's really realistic because you're like, this could totally happen in real life. And Rob Riggle is in the lead in a dramatic turn, which is kind of really cool. And I play the son's mother. So yeah, the lead boy's mother, I should say. And that's coming out in spring. And they have something else I can't really talk about yet, but Rufus is interrupting me anyway. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I have something else that's coming too, but you can find me on Instagram, and although all my friends are pushing me to go on TikTok, but right now it's Instagram at Vinessa Official. So Vinessa Official on Instagram. I'm on Twitter or whatever it is called now too, but I'm never on there. So don't bother reaching out to me there.
Yeah, I'm Joe.
Yeah.
Whoops. All right. Well, thank you so much. Once again, thank you so much, Vanessa. It was a pleasure, and we will see you very soon. Do not forget, everyone, once again, it's just a bunch of Halloween.com for all details and tickets. Come hang out with all of us, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
It's just a Buncha, Buncha, Buncha.
That's right.
Buncha.